Councillors, and let me begin by, I can take my mask off. Let me begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and their elders past, present and emerging. Welcome to the City Planning, Economic Development and Environment Committee meeting of the 7th of September 2021, and I declare this meeting open at 9 a.m. I would like to advise attendees in the room that this meeting is being webcast and audio recorded. I remind attendees to practice social distancing and take necessary safety precautions as per Council's COVID Safe Plan. Today we have all councillors in the room with us except for Councillor Stemp, who is live streaming because she has done the right thing, gotten a COVID test and staying home and isolating until she gets her results. As today's agenda does contain a confidential report, I note that a proposed motion to suspend section 711A4 of the A6, of the Local Government and Committee Meeting Code for the purposes of audio recording the closed session in today's meeting for Council's internal confidential use only is now displayed on the screen behind me. Is there a mover for this motion? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously, including Councillor Stemp. Thank you, councillors. I do not have any leaves of absence today, so we will move directly into the reports. The first report is item 4.1. It's an exemption from inviting tenders for development assessment software, ERPLA SAAS. I'll now refer to the Development Assessment Manager, Mr. Stephen Ball. No, I'm going to get his program leader, Justin, whose last name is hard to pronounce, Bajour. Did I get it right? No. Bajour. Thank you. Before we move into discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I'll now let Justin take it away.
Through the Chair, ERPLA is a unique purpose-built product designed to assist in the development, development assessment process and the development application preparation process. As ERPLA is the only provider or supplier in the market at present able to deliver this product, a tender process would unnecessarily delay the commencement of the project. Therefore, council officers are seeking council's endorsement to engage and engage with ERPLA without seeking tenders and going through the tender process. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Justin. Councillor Heremiah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Normally, when reports come up in committees about exempting something from inviting tenders, the report can sometimes be not very detailed, and sometimes it cannot include the amount of detail that has been mentioned in this report. This report has different tables, it has a matrix, it describes how section 235 of the local government regulation is reached and how that test has been reached in this report. So I hope that all areas of council take this sort of approach when it comes to exemptions from tenders, and I think this is really best practice when it comes to procurement in council. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Heremiah. Such strong endorsement, Justin. Well done. Are there any further questions? Is someone happy to move the report? Thank you, Councillor Heremiah, seconded by Councillor Russell. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried unanimously, including Councillor Stemp. Thank you very much, Justin. And that is how we get through the agenda quickly, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, that marks the end of the Development Assessment Manager's reports. Is there any general business for Stephen Ball? There being none, Stephen, do you have any for us? Were you hiding up the back somewhere? No. Thank you, my good man. Great work. We'll now move on to item 5.1, which is a report for the Economic Development Strategy 2022 to 2027. Can the Development Assessment Strategy Manager, Mr. David Radich, please enter discussions? Before we discuss this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, it looks like Tate's up the front, so Tate Ryan is going to speak to it. Thank you very much. Please stand by while he takes his call.
Through the chair.
Good, thank you, Tate.
I did put that on Do Not Disturb, so it's a mystery to me.
You're out for lunch.
So, through the chair, it is with my pleasure to present the Logan City Economic Development Strategy 2022 to 2027 and accompanying implementation plan for endorsement. This strategy is co-designed with the community and key council stakeholders. Key council stakeholders recognises Logan City's council's proven history of leadership in the delivery of economic development services and the essential contribution to economic development of the city across all council directorates. This strategy presents a compelling economic vision and aspirations for the Logan economy. It sets the city's economic strategic directions over the next 5 years and establishes overarching economic principles and goals that will assist in measuring the city's success over time. It was pleasing to see that a prevailing theme across all consultation activities was the high level of business and community confidence in Logan's economic future, even during the economic shock caused by COVID-19. The implementation plan captures key strategies, objectives, actions, and KPIs to be pursued by Council and its partners to contribute towards achieving the stated economic vision and transformational aspirations. This plan involves multiple participation from different directorates, and as you'll go through there, is extremely aligned to achieving the objectives as outlined. Within the strategy itself, emphasis is placed on growth from within, building upon existing strengths and supporting the evolution of the city's businesses and industries. Leveraging our locational strengths within South East Queensland and the continued enhancement of our employment and city centres to attract skilled workers and national and global investment. Growing the Logan economy beyond simply trying to achieve better numbers in GDP and number of jobs, but emphasising the importance of community access to the benefits of the city's economic transformation via job quality, training and career pathways for youth and adults, innovation, economic inclusivity and local wealth building. After adoption of these documents, we will proceed to prepare a simplified council-designed and branded version for public and further promotion of our strategy. Thank you, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tate. I have a question from Councillor Herrmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wanting to understand the methodology behind how the focus areas in the city were determined. On page 194, it shows a map of the Parkridge focus areas. There's also other focus areas like Beanley and Meadowbrook. Now, the Meadowbrook focus area has a population of less than 10,000 people. The Parkridge focus area has a population of 80,000 people. Why is it that Parkridge, which has a population of 80,000 people as per this focus area, was given one focus area, and other parts of the city, which have substantially less people, have also been given the same amount of focus areas?
Through the Chair, I believe you're referring to the consultation report, those potential page numbers. So the methodology is always a challenge of how many public consultations can we hold. And although I think the focus on a name might concern people that other areas were not addressed through the consultation, that is not the case. Meadowbrook was originally planned to be sort of the centre location to gather and invite a wider remit of people and guests and community to come in and share their ideas. So for that, although Meadowbrook is mentioned, it was reached out much wider than those areas, so Parkridge included. But yes, we did not have a specific Parkridge centred location focus.
With those focus areas, I really fail to understand how the retail in Browns Plains can be lumped in to the same area as the industrial in Crestmead, the developing areas in Logan Reserve, and the rural tourism in Chambers Flat. These are very different and diverse areas, and it's not great to be in one focus area. I do have a question beyond the focus groups and about the actual workshops that were held for those focus groups. And on page 195, it talks about the Parkridge workshop, and it has some minutes from that workshop. Now, as the local councillor for Parkridge, I would have loved to be informed that this workshop was being held, and I would have loved an invitation to the workshop. Because when I look at the minutes, it concerns me about some of the information that was mentioned. The minutes state that Logan City Council does not preference Logan businesses in tendering and procurement. And that is a falsehood. That is false. Logan City Council has quite an innovative system that preferences local businesses in procurement, that encourages local businesses to be a part of our council economy. I also look at, in the minutes, things like make Logan beautiful to create a sense of pride. Logan has a sense of pride. Parkridge has a sense of pride. We don't need to create a sense of pride, and to insinuate that we don't is unfair in those minutes of the workshop. And it also states in the workshop that it was discussed Division 7 and 8 election platform commitments. Now, I'm fine talking about election platforms, but don't use ratepayer money to host those discussions. That is something that should be held outside of council business. That is something that you should, that if participants want to discuss election platforms, they can do it with their own dime, not ratepayers' money. So I'm really wanting to understand why councillors weren't invited and weren't informed about these workshops.
Through the chair. So the consultation occurred in 2020. I believe sorry, my dates are missing me, but all councillors were invited to those consultations. Now, with your one in particular, I do forget the date of when that was held and the nature of the invitation, but all councillors were invited to attend those events. We had various participation. Some councillors attended, some didn't, but they did. Your case in particular, I do not recall if the invitation, if you weren't available that day, or what the scenario was back in 2020 when those occurred. So on that point, so you also reference the various comments within that. Within consultation, the consultation report sort of was a catch-all. It captured all variety of comments from the community, good or bad. Our job was to sort of get the consultation report and then filter it into something that was sort of manageable and that we could move forward with. So we do acknowledge not all comments were potentially appropriate or resonate the reality of situations, but it was comments captured because the attendee was there and said such things, capturing all comments. The consultation report is purely a background document. It was not meant to indicate a position of council or our strategy as a whole. When you come back to the strategy, that truly represents exactly what we have acknowledged and presented and pushed to the forefront of discussions within economic development of the city.
No, I appreciate that, and thanks for the answers. And even in consultation, sometimes it's important to always stand up for the truth, and especially when falsehoods about supporting local businesses are mentioned, I would hope that council does mention the real facts of the situation, that we do preference local businesses. But thank you for the answers.
No, thank you very much for the question. And yes, community consultation is very challenging sometimes when you have that misunderstanding, and we'll fight the good fight along with councillors to get the truth out there. Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Wilcox.
Thank you. I'm a bit the same as Councillor Herremeyer as well, because I didn't attend this, and I have a feeling either I wasn't told about it or I had a really late invite to it and I might have had something else on, but I think it would have been good had we have been able to have attended and that sort of thing, because I just wanted to ask, with the opportunities that are on here for the Jim Boomer and Flagstone Summit, and actually for all of them, what have we done with the opportunities that are listed for each of these areas?
For once again, you're referring to the community consultation document. With those, so the opportunities that were manageable to be digested by council and realistic in a way that we could deal with it within the core of the strategy rose to the strategy document. There's strengths, weaknesses and opportunities within that document. And then from those, so there was a filter. I think through consultation we had around 150 general ideas or comments that we had to filter. Within the main document, you'll see the page referencing strengths, weaknesses and opportunities. We filtered to those points, and then we attempted to use those elements to craft further actions within the theme and flesh out an implementation plan that addresses those elements. So within the document itself, the very last page of the strategy, you'll actually see a matrix there, the very last page of the core strategy document, a linkage of referencing each aspiration and theme and how it links to the core strengths and weaknesses and opportunities that were identified through the consultation process. However, once again, it's not all of the things mentioned for each particular area as per the consultation report, and the implementation plans are ongoing living document. So that's our shot at this present stage. We'll go and develop that work and continue to look for opportunities to pull elements out with councillors' assistance of areas that we might need to focus on or leverage off opportunities mentioned. For example, if you see positive ones there that you think have legs and we have not mentioned in the implementation plan as of now, we'd continue to love and work at those areas. Implementation plans will change according to resourcing, opportunities that emerge, trialling and failing some areas. It's an evolving document, so thank you.
I just, like in the Jimboomba Flagstone one, for me, it's the same stuff that I keep saying whenever I'm in committee and that sort of thing, but I don't see anything getting done about it. So, or it's very, very slow to deliver. You know, and I have made comments for the business incubator and stuff like that with the high school students for it to come out and get pushed across the whole city rather than targeting the same schools each time, but it still hasn't happened. In here I can see infrastructure that attracts investment, upgrades to public infrastructure, upgrade to transport facilities, all of that's roads out there. Once we fix the roads, then we can attract all the businesses and stuff out there. So for me, it's the same stuff time and time again that's just not happening. But just on one, I just wanted to know, establish a trail biking facility. Is that moto or is that push bike?
I think that may have been motorbikes, if I recall correctly. Okay. There was interest in that facility.
All right, good to note. But yeah, again, this is the same stuff that I keep raising. But yeah, I'm just not seeing it go anywhere. Thanks.
That's good, Councillor Wilcox, because you're in touch with your community. I've got David Radich who wants to make a comment, then I'll go to Councillor Stemp.
Through the Chair, just a quick comment. So one of the differences between this economic development strategy and every other economic development strategy that councils do in South East Queensland is that we made a commitment to the community that they'll have a chance to participate in the strategy, and it's a co-design process. So what you're reflecting on in the background paper 4 around the focus groups is the feedback that we got from the community. So parts of the feedback have filtered through to the strategy, and I think that it's really important for council to draw their attention to the actual implementation plan, because that's what we're going to be doing over the next 4 or 5 years. So that outlines KPIs for us. For example, we're going to run 20 export events per year. So it's hard and fast KPIs of what we're going to achieve. So background paper 4 is there for the record because we did engage the community very heavily in this process, but the things that have filtered up from the community consultation are the bits that form part of the implementation plan. So I really think that council should draw their eyes to that document, because that is the one that will report back to council annually on how we have achieved those KPIs.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Stemp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my question is, with a strategy that spans 5 years, and obviously with the world changing so much so regularly, how often is this reviewed in terms of, obviously everything changes so quickly, and I just wanted to get an understanding of, is it an annual review, or how often are these strategy elements reviewed?
Through the Chair, it is. We come back to council every year to report on economic development activities, and we'll be reporting on this strategy through that mechanism. As mentioned previously, it is a living document, so we will adjust it when needed. We'll adapt to resources changes, adapting environments, etc. Obviously in consultation with yourselves and through our annual reporting cycle.
Thank you, Councillor Stemp. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, through the Chair. Councillor Raven. On page 211, it refers to Springwood, October, November 2020 summary of results. I went back and had a look at my emails, and yes, I did have an agenda, and I don't recall specifics about being invited or not being invited. That's not my focus. However, the report does refer to making Springwood a tourist destination, hidden attractions like the Buddhist temple and the mountain biking. I suppose what concerns me, obviously I've been the last two budgets talking about and able to get financial commitment from council. Thank you very much for that, for the bus turnaround at the end of Underwood Road. However, somehow that's not filtered to other areas in council. So, and I know it's not under your directorate, it's under another directorate, but it's not being filtered. And I'm not sure how these silos can be broken down so other areas can be informed about these sort of things. I don't know if you can talk about that.
Would you like to?
Chair. I think this is fine now. Through the chair, I think that's a great question. The program leader has referred to an all-of-council process in preparing this strategy. So all branches were engaged, all directorates were engaged, and I think it's important to note at this meeting that all have signed up to advance the interests of this economic development strategy. So I would like to think that if there's energy required or renewed energy required in a certain area of focus within this plan, then that will come back through an annual KPI reporting process, for instance, where councillors can see across the whole organisation, not just this team, within economic development strategy, but across the whole organisation, how we're performing and whether we need to reposition teams, reposition resources, support in any way the delivery of the outcomes of this strategy. So I think it actually adds momentum and emphasis to the work that is going on across council.
So when we're advocating for federal funding, for example, through the advocacy section in council, they can be informed about this sort of stuff?
Through the chair, I think when we set our advocacy priorities, this becomes a relevant document. It absolutely becomes a relevant document.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Are there any for David Radish?
So through the chair, if you look at the implementation plan, you'll see which other branches are involved in implementing this plan. So it's background paper 2, which outlines which branches will be helping us implement it. The director's right, it was a long process to go through with all other directorates and branches to ensure they agree to implementing this, but we got there in the end. So it's a whole of council document which has responsibilities across a range of directorates and branches. And just to confirm, we did invite all councillors to focus groups, to attend the focus groups. Some of them didn't accept, or some of them just weren't able to attend. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear to everyone that all councillors were asked to participate in the focus groups.
Thank you, David, and I'm just thrilled that all of the questions are in regards to feedback from the community at the focus groups. So the actual strategy and the implementation plan councils are clearly comfortable with, because they don't have any questions on those. They're just concerned about the way that the community's feedback has been published. The glorious thing about community consultation is they don't always say what you want or what you like. So, yeah, but it's good to know that they're saying that so that we can address those concerns or leverage off those opportunities. I'll give a big shout out to Councillor Bennon, who championed the removal of the footpath dining fees, and that's actually one of the pieces of feedback that was provided. So sometimes the feedback flows through very quickly because they're simple and easy to correct, and that came through our last budget. Other things like road infrastructure, a little bit slower than a wave of the pen because you've got to get things delivered. Are there any further questions from councillors, or are you comfortable to move the report? Councillor Kransky is moving. Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Would someone like to second the report? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Stemp, for raising your hand from home. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 5.2, which is the Investment Attraction Incentive Fund report. Before we move into discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest you'd like to declare? There being none, I assume that Tate is speaking because he's still at the lectern, so I'll let him go straight into this one.
Through the chair, thank you. The Logan City Council Investment Attraction Incentive Fund from 2000 to 2021 successfully attracted and secured 15 businesses, 900 new and retained jobs, and over $120 million worth of investment into the city. Given the fund's success and council's support for an expansion and continued delivery of the fund over the next 3 years, this report seeks adoption to an updated terms of reference and the guidelines and eligibility criteria for the Investment Attraction Incentive Fund to further improve the delivery, governance and effectiveness of the fund in achieving desirable outcomes for the city. The updated guidelines include an amended target industry list, the inclusion of a high priority investment list and the application of a multiplier effect in calculating potential funding. So the list targets assets that are either non-existent, underrepresented, sought after by the business or residential community, and ideally would have far-reaching benefits for the local economy. Projects that fall within Council's high priority investment list may activate a multiplier of up to 3 times the nominated level of funding that a project would normally be eligible for. And lastly, wording changes to improve the clarity of the eligibility criteria for the fund. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions, councillors? Councillor Wilcox.
Do you have a date for the next meeting? Because I wasn't able to attend the last one.
Yes, we do, but off the top of my head, I've totally forgotten what that date is. My apologies.
It's all right if you can just get it to me, just so I can make sure that I'm actually here for this next one. Thank you.
Excellent, will do, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Councillors, this fund is actually one of the centrepieces in our City of Opportunity pitch. Last week, the Mayor and I, or 2 weeks ago, the Mayor and I attended the Suburban Alliance in Brisbane and spoke to industry, and they proactively asked questions about this fund, and businesses that were not thinking about coming to Logan specifically came up to us afterwards and said, because of that fund, we're going to take money out of Brisbane and look at spending it and investing in Logan instead, because that's a fantastic idea to attract the industries that you want. So it is effective, and now that it's bigger, we can actually promote it instead of just offering it to people when they're thinking about either choosing between us or a lesser city. So it's great that that this has come forward and that we've got these adjustments so we can really go out and push it hard and attract some great businesses and investments. Would someone? Question? You got a question too, Mr. Mayor? I'll just take Councillor Wilcox and I'll let you finish.
Sorry, I was just going to ask, so how are we going out and attracting businesses to come with this?
Through the chair. So through our existing team of investment attraction officers and business development executives, we constantly proactively deal with inquiries coming in, and we also have marketing elements to spread the word of Logan out far and wide. So it's a mixture of both of those elements, but this is another tool in the toolkit that we point to and often use as a leverage to go out there and use as an advertising sort of element as well. But generally it's a lot of word of mouth and hard work by our officers to reach out to businesses throughout this country.
Just thinking if you would like to get like a bit of a media push on socials and that sort of thing, you've got 13 of us sitting in the room that we could push out on our socials if you guys could get a media.
We appreciate the offer and we'll follow up on that.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Mr. Mayor.
I was just going to ask a question about a theatre. Is there anyone in the miss or any interest there? Because we did have Watland Street as a potential cinema at one stage, and I was just wondering if we've got any others, because for a number of reasons, I think, you know, the city's going to grow up, it needs an art house theatre, and also I don't think there's not enough competition in the city for the theatre movie prices. I think the Hyperdome are scalping people at $20 a seat when you can go to Redlands and pay $7.50. Is there anyone out there? Because I would like to see, obviously, something happen in that area.
Through the chair, a lot of the energy has come out of the cinema discussion through COVID, obviously, but It's important to my team and I to get the opportunities laid up on a platter if and when they want to transact. So, yes, Watland, there's been a lot of discussions around digital cinemas in Beenleigh. We've crafted an incentive arrangement under our policy where we can defer infrastructure charges. So if and when the inquiries come back, we're well positioned, I think, and the planning scheme encourages it in our centres without an application.
I understand it's a difficult time to ask that question because I know that because of COVID, cinemas aren't in great demand. But, you know, you can only see that in near future, when obviously vaccination takes place, when we get to 80% and people come out, there's going to be a big demand. And they're holding back all the blockbusters, and people haven't been able to go to the movies, or there's nothing to attract them to the movies. But once they go, I can imagine there'll be a big call out. And I would hate to think that, you know, the eastern side of the freeway all go to Redlands just to pay $7.50 a ticket when they could be going somewhere in the city.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question from Councillor Hall and Councillor Murphy.
Through the chair, look, I actually think cinemas are probably, unless people are prepared to go out and support them heavily after this COVID transition, they're probably going to be a thing of the past, much like circuses and showgrounds and shows. Simply the fact that entertainment's become more on demand at home. You know, with things like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and et cetera, many of the big production cinema studios, they're just sending them straight to home platforms now. So you could go to the cinema and watch Black Widow, or you could just sit at home and watch it. So the need to go to the cinema is vastly deteriorating, and I understand there's a lot of people that, you know, love to go to the cinema. It used to be a family thing that you did with your family. You'd go out and do it. And I know, you know, people will still go out and support Yatla, the drive-in cinema and whatnot. But I don't know. I'm not seeing the demand there from people. You know, why would you go to Beenleigh when you could still just go to the Hyperdome? They've got a great cinema there. There were discussions before about cinemas being in Division 6, and they didn't go too far. I believe there's more to it. But I don't know. I think encouraging something where there's no demand for it, or where the demand's quite poor, it will be at folly.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Ultimately, the market will decide if they invest or not. Councillor Murphy.
Thank you, through the chair. I've sat on this panel. It's a great opportunity to attract those companies into Logan, and they end up becoming champions for our hour. So they also bring other businesses, other jobs, etc. I think this is an awesome program. I'm happy to support this, and I'll move the report if you like, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murphy. Councillor Karansky.
I was also happy to move the report if Councillor Murphy hadn't, so I'm very happy to second.
Excellent. So I have no further questions. The report has been moved by Councillor Murphy, seconded by Councillor Karansky. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously, including Councillor Stemp. Thank you very much, councillors. We'll now move on to item 5.3, which is the Meadowbrook Parking Strategy. I do note that it's a confidential report, but before we move into any discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note that item 5.3 is confidential because it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as the confidential attachments contain information that could have implications to council's budget. Do any councillors wish to move into confidential for this item, or are you happy to vote on it as it stands without questions or discussion? As no councillors are willing to move into confidential, I will put the motion on the screen. Councillors, you have a motion before you. Would someone like to move this motion? Thank you, Mr Mayor. Would someone like to second the motion? Thank you, Councillor Bannon. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Hall. And I'll get to it. You can put your hands down.
Yeah, I'd like to abstain, thanks.
Councillor Hall has abstained, and Councillor Wilcox?
I'll abstain.
No worries. Thank you very much, councillors. Councillors, we'll now move on to item 5.4, which is another confidential report. It is for the deferral of infrastructure charges for domestic violence emergency accommodation. Before we move into any discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they'd like to declare? There being none, I note that it is necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session as the report discusses the deferral of infrastructure charges for a development as well as an amendment to the Logan Charges Resolution. We can discuss parts of this report in open session as long as you don't refer to the specific property and you don't refer to the cost of the infrastructure charges because they can vary from property to property. But if you want to talk about the principle that's outlay, you can do that in open session. You don't need to move into confidential unless you want to discuss numbers or the actual property address. So you're happy to stay in open session, or would someone prefer to move into confidential? No, I'm saying open session. Excellent. That is my preference as well. Councillors, I've got a question from Councillor Bennett, but I'll just let Dave Radich speak to the report and then I'll move into questions from there.
Through the Chair. The current adopted infrastructure charges resolution allows a deferral of infrastructure charges for not-for-profit organisations such as churches or people that provide emergency accommodation for domestic violence. In this case, and the current policy position is that we will defer 50% of the infrastructure charges. In this case, we feel that those organisations that are providing emergency accommodation for domestic people escaping domestic violence should receive a higher amount of a deferral, and we're proposing a 100% deferral for those infrastructure charges. I know that there is certainly a need for these types of services within the city, and I feel that it is appropriate for council to be able to create a position where we are able to support the development of these particular types of uses across the city and defer their infrastructure charges 100%. It requires a decision of council and it requires an amendment to our current policy, specifically for those uses providing emergency accommodation for domestic violence. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Just before I move into questions from Councillors Bannon and Lane, I note that you've said 100% deferral. Does that mean if the property changes from domestic violence accommodation in the future that we would then charge the new owner the cost of the infrastructure charges?
Through the Chair, that's correct.
Cool. So as long as it remains for that purpose, which has a benefit to the community, the infrastructure charges don't have to be paid. Cool. Thank you. Councillor Bannon.
Thank you. Through the Chair, you actually asked one of them. The second one, it says for people, so these are for male and female victims of DV?
Through the Chair, yes, male and female people that are affected by domestic violence.
Cool. I just want to make sure it wasn't one of us for all victims of DV. Great news.
Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Lane.
Thanks very much. Through you, Mr Chair. You answered one of my questions, so good on you, Mr Chair, for asking that question. The second one is, if a group looks at doing the domestic violence sphere and they find that, for whatever reason, they can't continue in that service in that particular location because of, a release of, say, privacy and things like that, will the company actually be charged the infrastructure charges if they have to sell the property as a result of, say, someone breaching a DV and letting everyone know where that particular property is, or?
So through the Chair, so the way that it will work is we will enter into an infrastructure agreement with someone who is looking to provide domestic violence housing, and that infrastructure agreement will remain with the land, so the actual site. So if the property is no longer used for that particular use, the person that then takes over the site would be eligible for to pay some infrastructure charges.
Thank you. And my second question is, Family and Kids Care have had homeless shelter, which primarily has taken domestic violence clients over the last decade or more. They're looking at another application to go in for an additional one. Would you need to come back into a future committee meeting, or is this across the board where anyone who's doing these domestic violence shelters will be given 100%?
If council makes the decision to 100% defer infrastructure charges for domestic violence, it's across the city. So once this decision is made, it doesn't apply geographically to one area, it's any development across the city.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. I just want to commend the staff. This came up as a one-off request by a charity that's doing domestic violence accommodation, and the staff said this shouldn't be a one-off. This should be a citywide approach, because they recalled that at the start of the term, councillors were very concerned about the impact of domestic violence on our city and wanted to understand what we could do as a council. And at the time, the levers that we could pull appeared pretty limited. But something like this means that infrastructure charges, which depending on the size of the development can be quite expensive, can now be spent on services if we defer those charges. The city never misses out. So if the community benefit fades over time because it just turns into normal residential housing without the domestic violence focus, those infrastructure charges still get called in when the new owner takes over. So I think it is actually the best of both worlds, where so long as the charitable purpose that we all agree is important is being served, then that discount remains, and if that ever changes, the city gets the contribution that it needs to continue delivering on amazing parks, footpaths, roads and community centres. So thank you very much to you and your team, Dave. I was very impressed with the attitude that you took when this was raised with me and then passed on to you, so I'm grateful for the opportunity. I believe Councillor Kerensky is asking to move the report, or did you want to speak to it? Would someone like to second that? Thank you, Councillor Murphy. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously, including Councillor Stemp. Fantastic work, Dave, and thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the Economic Development and Strategy Managers' reports. Dave, do you have any general business for us?
Through the chair, no, I do not.
I believe that Councillor Lane has general business for you, so strap yourself in.
Not at all, actually. So I had an occasion to get in touch with the DA branch in relation to McPhee Place and the noise that's been emitted from there, from the businesses. I'd just like to say thanks to Sherry and Stephen Ball for the quick turnaround and response. One of the things that happened is, obviously this is a historical industrial estate plunked down right next to residential location. There's a thing where the business actually has to build sound barriers between them and the houses, and they still haven't done that despite council putting the heads up to them that it needs to be done. In claiming COVID has impacted imports and the way they can build their sound barriers, these residents are actually being impacted. And while you've put restrictions on the hours that they can work and try and bring back some quality lifestyle to those residents, there continues to be this angst amongst the people in the bottom end of Kingston about this development. Most in particularly, what's coming next. They know that properties have been sold, they know that the industrial site is going to expand, but what they don't seem to get from council is, hey, in 6 months' time, building works will commence in this particular section. These are the steps we put in place to mitigate these noises, dust, and what have you. The amount of traffic has grown substantially through that Barton Road section, despite 3rd Avenue supposedly taking a lot of the traffic off them. It hasn't happened. So it's about reassuring residents from that particular, from Dewars Road to Lingrove to Barton Road, what's coming in their future, and if there's some way in which you can correspond with them and seek feedback from them, that would be greatly appreciated.
Through the chair, Councillor Lane, yeah, what we typically do would, once a development application is on hand for council to assess, we would provide the technical elements of a letter that could go out under your hand or under the branch's hand, which explains exactly the things that you're referring to. So we'd be more than happy to work with you on that.
Thanks very much.
No, all good. Awesome. Thank you very much, Councillor Lane. Councillors, that is the end of the strategy and sustainability reports. Due to COVID restrictions, Michael Asnikar has not come to the room because he did not have any reports. Do you have any general business, either for Michael through David Hanson as the director? Councillor Lane, with a very excited raising of the hand.
Yes, I do. So this morning, Cleanaway went past my place picking up the curbside rubbish. Really excited, they're quiet, they're efficient, they're just knocking it over. So big thanks to them. And hopefully this will be the last time that we see rubbish on the curbsides outside of clean-up when council's enforcement actually activates and ramps up and actually fines people for dumping their household treasures out on the footpath outside of curbside. So great job to Cleanaway and yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lane, for opening the Cleanaway bin. Councillor Wilcox and Councillor Murphy.
Mine's not on Cleanaway. Mine is a thank you to Michael. Last week he put a message out to all of us asking if we wanted to pop up onto the roof and go and see the new solar panels and everything. So I know I popped up. I haven't done a post yet, but it was pretty awesome to go and see. And I took some very cool photos of Div 11 in the background, which I will post, but it was really cool to go up there. I've always wondered what it looks like up there, and I'm loving the fact that I get to go onto the top of these buildings and that sort of thing and go and see what's up there. So thanks to him for letting us go up there and have a look.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Did you want to respond? You're all good. No. Happy to just bask in the glory of the praise. Yeah, reflected glory. Councillor Murphy, then Councillor Bradley.
I just wanted to follow up after Councillor Lane. I agree totally. Cleanaway has been amazing. Michael has been really proactive with any rubbish that was left after the curbside collection. Me personally, I don't like curbside collection, and yes, I'm on the record for that one. But I also want to suggest that we do look at amping up the fining of people that leave rubbish out on their footpath just because they can. There's plenty of opportunities to sell those things through Marketplace, through Facebook, through eBay, through all sorts of things. We've got to try to keep our city clean. So I'm right behind Councillor Lane with regards to maybe having a bit of an audit of our city of those things happening, and let's keep our city clean. Thank you.
Sounds like the illegal dumping task force is going to be very busy. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. I'm 100% supportive of that. The purpose of me putting my hand up a couple of committees ago, maybe the last committee, I'm not sure, I can't 100% remember. I did ask Mr Asnikar about how many trees have been planted in Division 1 since I was elected in 2008, and I got that information today, 29,000. So I'm pretty impressed by that. David, Mr Hanson, sorry, may I ask you to pass on sincere thanks to all the staff involved with collating that information, because that was a number of branches involved in obtaining that, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley, and it's every kid gets a turn. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Just while we are talking about curbside, I'd like to remind residents that if you have a property with a large frontage and other people are dumping on front of your property, make sure you let council know as soon as possible, because you don't want to be up for these charges for property that's not yours. Poor old Pineland Street quite often cops a fair bit of unwanted rubbish, which isn't mine. But whenever it happens, I make sure to let council know so that they can come and collect it. So I'm letting other residents know who have properties of large frontages that do get other people's waste put on it, let council know, and we might be able to do something to help you in that regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Are there any other councillors? No? Excellent. I will declare this meeting closed at 9:49, and the next meeting is sorry, I forgot one. Oh no, not closed. Undo that one. I got so excited with the GB being over, I was like, we're out of here.
What's going on here?
I don't really want to do the next report, no. The next item is item 6.1. Thank you, Mr Hanson. If you could send in Dr Scott. I know, I've got two more. Way out of the game. I thought I could just wrap it up and no one would notice. Bada boom, bada bing. I was just listening to the Mayor's instruction to wrap it up quickly. even though he triggered a series of cinema-related questions. Councillors, the next item is a confidential report for the future funding of the Logan City Council membership of Council of Mayors. The Director of Innovation and City Transformation, Dr. Scott, has entered the room along with Kirsten Pietzner, who will be speaking to the report. Before I move into any discussions, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they would like to declare? There being none, I note it's considered necessary to take the discussion of this report into a closed session, as a confidential report contains information in relation to Logan City Council's financial information. Do any councillors wish to move into closed session for this item, or are you happy to discuss it as it stands? A number of councillors would like to. Councillors, if you would like to, councillors, Mr. Mayor has moved us into closed session as the report refers to Logan City Council's financial information to discuss the matter. That has been seconded by Councillor Bradley. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Yeah, I'm going to go with Councillor Karansky on this one. That was carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Karansky and myself. Did anyone else keep their hand down? Councillor Karansky against? Against. Ditto. Too easy. Councillors, we will now move into that. As that motion is carried, the meeting is now closed to the public. Please be advised that the meeting is now in confidential session, and therefore the video streaming of this meeting will be suspended, but audio recording will continue in order to keep a public record. Councillors, we're now back in open session and there is a recommendation on the board, on the screen, I should say. Mr. Mayor, are you still comfortable with the date at which that becomes public? Or did you want to change that date to a future, you want to change that? So you want to amend?
I got the council mayors on Friday.
So you want to change clause 2 that the corporate governance manager be requested to?
I don't think we need to put in the public records because...
There's just a standard one that for when the manager wants to do it at their discretion. You've got to do something. It's got to go into a public record eventually.
What do we normally do?
It's either at a set date or at a time as determined by the manager, or you could set it to the CEO if you want.
Yeah, do that.
You want the CEO instead of the manager? Please stand by. Can you please change that to the discretion of the Chief Executive Officer? Sorry. Councillors, there is an amended motion on the screen. Would anyone like to move that motion? Thank you, Councillor Bradley, seconded by Mr. Mayor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Harrimeyer. How do you vote?
Against.
Thank you, Councillor Harrimeyer. Thank you, councillors, for that debate and discussion. We'll now move on to item 8.1. 7.1? It's 8.1 in my script because it's a late report. This is the citywide hydrogen assessment. I will now call, thank you very much, Kirsten. See you later. I'll now call for the Business Transformation Manager, Mr. Andrew Herford, to please, no, not the Business Transformation Manager, Eva. I'll now call for Eva to please come to the front of the room to speak to her report. Before I move into discussions on this item, do any councillors have any conflicts of interest they would like to declare at this time? There being none, I will give Eva a moment to come to the front and settle in, and then she can speak to her report. Thank you. Take it away.
Through the chair, just to just make a note of a couple of key points from the report. So obviously hydrogen as an energy source is a growing and emerging industry. We've got some extreme interest both at the federal and the state level in terms of investment around hydrogen. So I'm happy to table the report as read and happy to take any questions.
Councillors, are there any questions on this report? No? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Interesting report. It's sort of, to me, it's come very quickly. I know that hydrogen's a new buzzword, and I know we've got a Minister for Hydrogen as one of our local state members, and sort of getting my head around it, and one that supports alternative energy sources. I pick up my Tesla car tonight. It's just one thing that concerns me, and I understand that obviously trucks are the major beneficiary, I think, with hydrogen, and I think in Europe the trucks are powered by hydrogen, because I don't believe that battery power will be able to give that sort of the power energy ratio that needs to haul big trucks around, particularly ones full of rubbish and that type of thing. But aren't we in the absolute infancy of this new direction? In other words, should we be waiting a little bit longer? This is an open question. There's no yes or no response here. I just want your knowledge on this. Is it too soon now to do this? Should we wait another year before it sort of manifests itself into Queensland as a bit more of a plan? Because I think at the moment Bundaberg's going to be receiving the majority of funding for this for the state government. I'm just wondering whether we're too soon on this. I understand that we've got to have someone on the ground to try and get funding, and I know we've got the training centre in Bentley, but just wondering if it's just too soon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll let Dr. Scott respond to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, through the chair. Mr. Mayor, it's a good question, and I suppose the simple response that I'd give you is that what we're talking about is the development of a strategy to guide our investment, as opposed to an investment in particular projects per se. And so, in fact, your point is very well made in that this investment is prudent at this particular point in time, because it puts us in a position to be able to determine whether or not we should be making investments at all in this technology across a range of areas on behalf of council, as well as, and I know the Director of Strategy and Sustainability and Economic Development and Strategy as a branch would say that there may very well be significant opportunities from an economic development standpoint for the city that could be considered as part of this report, and that would the report would in fact inform our thinking around the sorts of investments as well as activities that we might investment-related activity we might undertake.
As I said, I support alternative energy, and I think, as I've said, and probably everyone's sick of it. If it wasn't for COVID, we'd all be talking about climate change. I guess if we're going to put ourselves into this, we're going to put ourselves right into it, because I don't believe there's a half-pregnancy issue here. Once we start to spend funding here, we go all the way. So, I want to see from the councillors that councillors want to get involved in this, and this technology is advancing quickly in European countries, and I've spoken to waste transport companies, and they're already initiating trucks to come here in South East Queensland as Bundaberg to happen. So I'm obviously on board as soon as we talk about climate change. I just wonder whether, this is, do we want to defer this a little bit, or do we want to go right now, let's go, I'm behind it. But that's all I'm going to put up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I don't think anyone's questioning your green credentials. You're well known as an advocate for renewable energy and alternative energy sources. I've got Councillor Bradley next. I'll just say quickly that I do acknowledge the huge investment that's gone to Gladstone from the state government over a number of years into LNG infrastructure, which transfers to hydrogen infrastructure, and our lack of that. A business case could help us identify where those gaps are, but the question is, do you want to do it now, out of budget sequence, because it's asking for a budget amendment, or do you want to wait until... Yeah, but you'll need to do the business case out of budget sequence if you want to do it now. Otherwise, you could defer it to next year's budget if you want to buy yourself some time.
I'm happy. I'm just making sure the council's on board.
Understood. I'll let Councillor Bradley speak now.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Raven. I probably did have similar concerns as the mayor, because basically you're asking for a budget amendment of $95,000 to do a strategy. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor Bradley.
Yeah, and I have expressed previously to the state member, who's obviously, this is his portfolio, it would be nice to have some sort of renewable energy in our patch of the world. But obviously that was before the announcement was made. But anyway, yeah, I do have concerns of the timing. It's possibly a little early, but anyway, that's just my thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Kransky.
All I was going to say is that I won't be supporting this today simply because it's outside of the budget cycle, and I'm not seeing the time sensitivity that's associated with this. So, but theoretically, I'm very happy to review this again in the right time frame, which is around budget. So just to clarify my position, I won't be supporting this report today, but I'm very happy for it to come back at budget.
Thank you, Councillor Kransky. Councillor Heremeier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo Councillor Karansky's sentiments. It was a late report for out of budget sequence. And the report's just a bit half-baked, so I won't be supporting, I'm leaning towards not supporting this either, not because of the technology, not because of the green sentiment, I'm a fan, just because of those technical details.
Thank you, Councillor Heremeier. Dr. Scott would like to respond.
Just perhaps some clarifying comments to explain the late nature of the report to the query from Councillor Heremeier and the comment, other comments councillors made. Part of the reason why we brought this report on fairly quickly is that there are a number of projects that the organisation is actually looking at that are hydrogen related, including in water, which of course, if they did require substantial investment, may very well come to council for consideration. The thinking behind the accelerated development of the strategy is that in order to bring some degree of coordination, if you like, and coherent thinking to the way in which as an organisation we're approaching hydrogen, it would be prudent ahead of those individual projects actually coming to council to have a coordinated approach to the way in which we actually consider investment in that technology. So rather than council simply seeing a sequence of projects coming up in the hydrogen space for investment, which will be out of budget if they have to come to council anyway, it would be sensible to actually have an understanding, and for council to have an understanding, and for the overall organisation to have an understanding as to where it would make sense to actually prioritise investment in this type of technology for the problems that we're seeking to solve. So a strategy is a very sensible approach from the organisation's perspective, notwithstanding that it is late. The second point that I'd make is that there are plenty of other councils, local governments in Queensland as well as in Australia who are actually taking a similar approach to the approach, or I should correct myself, have already taken a similar approach to the approach that we're proposing that council take in terms of developing a strategy before individual projects investments are being considered. So that's actually I suppose the context for the speed, if you like, at which, or the accelerated nature of the paper.
Thank you, Dr. Scott. So just to flesh out, and if you responded to this question while I was talking to the meeting services team, I apologise. So just to flesh out the concerns of Councillors Karansky and Heremeier effectively, is it likely that there's going to be investment between now and the next budget cycle? Without a strategy, does that leave us in a position where we're essentially responding on an ad hoc basis to potential investment from state, fed or private, and that we may have to participate in? So what is the benefit of acting now, and what is the risk of acting later?
So I suppose the benefit of acting now is that if there are a portfolio of projects, if you like, that could be advanced by the organisation, which will be out of budget cycle if funding is required, a strategy puts council in a position to be able to consider those individual projects investments in a more coherent, if you like, and strategic way, rather than simply looking at those projects individually in terms of their investment ROI.
The risk of delay is essentially the same as the benefit.
Well, the risk of delay would be, through the chair, that you're going to be making individual project investments out of sequence with a strategy. So logically, you would approach investment strategy first, individual project investments decisions following the strategy.
Thank you very much.
And sorry, could I just make another comment through the chair? The question that you asked in relation to the likelihood that council will see these sorts of projects if funding is required, or funding will be invested in hydrogen-related projects where council's approval isn't required, is highly likely.
And so without a strategy, that investment from whoever's doing it could go anywhere they wanted it to without us having any strategic input into what the city expects.
That's correct. We're in a position where we don't know what we don't know. If I could make one other comment, if you want an analogy, Mr Deputy Mayor, the benefit of actually having a strategy similar to a business case is that it puts us in a very, very strong position to be able to advocate, in particular if we are seeking funding from the state or federal government in relation to individual projects that we're undertaking. A strategy is a very powerful advocacy tool.
Thank you, Dr Scott. I have Councillor Lane, Kerensky, Hall and Mayor Power.
Thanks very much to you, Chair. Dr Burke, my question is, you've got to be in it to win it. You've got to have the assessment done. You need to know what projects you're going to put forward in order to secure any state or federal funding. My question is around, are you employing new people under this $95,000 program?
Through the Chair, no, it'd be a consultant's report that it takes approximately 3 months. Councillor Lane, we've already spoken to a specialist consultant who would be able to undertake the work, who's developed similar strategies for other local governments in Queensland.
Is there a reason why our officers can't do that report?
Highly technical field, specialist field, Councillor Lane. It would not be possible for us to actually undertake that kind of highly technical market.
But the needs assessment, Dr Burke, could be done by council officers, thus alleviating part of the cost?
I'm not an expert in the area and I'll have to take that question on notice, but not on the basis of the discussions that we've had, Councillor Lane. It would be an outsourced strategy that would be developed largely by the external consultant in consultation with our own staff.
So not being an expert on this issue, and I'm not either, you're asking for $95,000 outside of budget time to do a report that could potentially save us millions of dollars in state or federal funding. Is that what you're proposing?
As the report outlined, the benefit areas are twofold. One is because hydrogen, as the Mayor identified, is a potential source of green energy, or green hydrogen is a potential source of low-cost, carbon neutral energy. There is going to be potential benefits for the organisation in terms of reduced energy costs and or support for our carbon neutrality targets. And the second area of benefit will be the potential to seek funding from state and federal governments in relation to projects that we might be looking to undertake which have a hydrogen connection.
Thanks. So the $95,000, what's the return for ratepayers? What does it get them?
The benefit for ratepayers, Councillor Lane, through the Chair, is that it provides clear guidance and direction for Council in relation to the investments that we choose to make or we choose not to make. So it informs...
So it's not going to reduce the overall cost of their water, it's not going to reduce the overall cost of their rates, it's $95,000 to secure something to make Council more energy efficient.
And or put us in a position to be able to seek funding from state and federal governments in relation to the projects that might do that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Kerensky.
Thank you, through the Chair. You were clarifying my position before. I just wanted to extend on that a little bit. A lot of what we've discussed today simply just isn't captured in this report. And I recall Councillor Jeremiah saying some time ago that the ask is for us to invest $95,000 out of a budget cycle on the basis of a 3-page report. And the report simply doesn't provide us with the level of detail that's required. We sat in this room, and I'm conscious that we're in public, agonising over each dollar that was spent in the budget. And there are projects that I would have thought would be far more viable that had a lot of detail behind them that we knocked back because we didn't think that it was at that time prudent to spend the funding. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not now. I'm happy to look at it as part of the budget coming up. And also each time that we artificially introduce an item out of budget sequence, there are unforeseen consequences associated with that as well. So, there's no time pressure on this. The only pressure we put upon it is ourselves. And I stand by what I said before. There's simply not enough detail and there's no urgency.
Thank you, Councillor Kerensky. From Dr Scott's comments, there's some urgency, so he disagrees.
I would say that I disagree. There was probably the same urgency before the budget to put this up in the last budget, and yet we did not.
I don't think hydrogen was It was on the state's agenda, but not in the way it is now.
I think you have a look at what's happening in Gladstone. It's been on for quite some time. It's not new technology, after all.
It is, but
It's not 3 months new, John.
Councillor Karansky, can you please withdraw your remarks and speak when the chair gives you permission?
Thought I was continuing, but my apologies, Councillor Reagan.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall.
Through the chair, is there any risk to public safety if we were to go forward with this? Because with the report, it hasn't really identified any risks to safety or to the public in terms of the use of hydrogen-related material.
Through the chair, I'm not aware of, because I'm not a technical expert in the area of the use of hydrogen and its various applications, but I'd simply point to the fact that this is in relation to the development of a strategy, so it's not actually an investment nor recommending an investment per se in hydrogen technology for particular applications. It's just actually looking at the range of potential investment applications that Council might consider to determine which of those are likely to be suitable for consideration by Council. So it's a strategy as opposed to an individual project investment.
Couldn't that be done just by sitting back and looking at someone else doing it first?
With the greatest respect, Councillor Hall, I'm not sure that qualifies as a strategy. I mean, it may in certain circumstances, not one that I'm familiar with.
Like, my understanding is if you see someone else doing something well, sometimes you can incorporate that into your future budget, future strategies, instead of being the guinea pig per se in terms of new technologies that are available. I've had a similar experience with something else somewhere else with something like this, and unfortunately, once you no longer have access to the talent to manage something like this, it goes in the wrong direction, because you essentially need physicists to be able to monitor some of what these things are doing, because as far as I know a fair bit about this technology, is it's not at a reliable level yet.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. I think the risk that this report is trying to mitigate, that Dr. Scott clarified earlier, is that without some kind of a strategy, the state could have just invest in hydrogen in our city and say, well, we don't have a strategy, so we're going to use our own. It's almost like the regional plan all over again, where if you don't say these are the areas that we're interested in or that we think is appropriate, could be related to water, other areas, they can just come in and go, well, you've got no strategy, so we're going to take that as you're flexible and we'll just do what we want in your city without your input because you've got no approach. And that is the risk that is trying to be mitigated by having a strategy in place that says these are the areas that we believe is good for our city and our community, as opposed to the areas where somebody else who doesn't have the same knowledge of our community could just drop it in. But completely acknowledge where you're going with trying to say, can't we just look at what someone else is doing and imitate? Unfortunately, imitating Brisbane doesn't work out too well for us because they're a very different city to us.
But that almost sounds like we're drawing defences for an enemy we don't even know we have.
There is no enemy. It's literally a strategy. The strategy, all it is doing...
Point of order. Through the chair, can I ask that we stick to the topic of, rather than arguing from the chair?
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Not a point of order, but I take your point. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I don't want to throw this out because I know that we'll need to use hydrogen in the future. My concern is, at the moment, climate change is happening now, and we're doing our best to address the issue. The hydrogen technology is very, very expensive. And if you remember 15 years ago, solar panels were very, very expensive. They're refined now to a point where you get so much money for your bucks now that you'd be a mug not to be in the solar power. I've got the maximum on my roof, and obviously getting an electric car, it's going to be, a financial advantage to my family to be in it. You get a rebate, and it's paid off so much quicker. It's so much less expensive now. hydrogen's probably got to go down that track. We are in a major program at the moment. We're planting trees, we're putting solar panels, we're doing everything we can to be carbon neutral. My concern is the report now is, what is the benefit of that report? What's the outcome? If we delay that report, technology is going to advance quickly, and that report might be irrelevant in, say, 18 months' time. New technologies, new ways of dealing with hydrogen, etc., etc. In the meantime, the money that we got, that we're spending on replanting trees, buying environmental land, putting our solar panels on our roof, doing those things, is probably the best bangs for dollars at the moment. My concern is that if we get into hydrogen now, it'll be very, very expensive. I do know there'll be a role to play, particularly with our garbage trucks, where alternative power is needed for those trucks, and that's what's happening in Europe. But I'm just thinking this business plan might change in a year's time. That's all I'm saying. The technology will advance. The prices might get a lot cheaper. It might financially viable. We might be doing the council a disservice by doing a business plan now, because we might do a business plan and spend $90,000 and find that we can't afford hydrogen at the moment anyway. But I like the idea of hydrogen, and I think the city will like the idea of hydrogen, but I just think, is this the right time to do the plan? That's all I have as a reservation. I think, maybe we rather than send a negative concept out to the city that we're not interested in that, we just defer this to budget.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Lane, Bannon, Wilcox.
Thanks. Through you, Mr Chair, I'm with Mr Mayor. I support his push for environmentally friendly items. I don't think that we had enough time going into this, and we don't have enough understanding of it. Can I move that we defer this to a future meeting and we get a briefing in the interim from Dr Burke, if that's okay? I'd rather be across it before I commit $95,000 of ratepayers' money to this.
Thank you, Councillor Lane. Councillor Bannon. Thank you, Councillor Bannon. Councillor Wilcox. Councillors, at the beginning of the Mayor's comments, I prepared an amended motion in case that he wanted to go down this path, where it just refers it to a future budgets register, which is what was being discussed at the beginning. So while you may think I was arguing from the chair, I was prepared for this outcome. And I just wanted to make sure that the Mayor's position was clear, because this report was being brought forward for his benefit to advocate. So if the Mayor feels more comfortable having it come later, then I'm happy to support the Mayor in that. So is that what? So Councillor Lane indicated she wanted to foreshadow an amended motion. Are you comfortable with this motion on the screen, Councillor Lane?
If everyone's comfortable with a future budgets register, I was just going to put it towards a future committee, but that's fine.
I see some head nodding. Mr Mayor, are you happy to second that motion? Yep. So that is moved. The amended motion on the screen is moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Mayor Power. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That has been carried unanimously with the exception of Councillor Murphy. I'm against. Thank you, Councillor Murphy. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the Innovation and City Transformation agenda. Do any councillors have any general business for Eva or for Dr Scott?
Yes.
Councillor Bradley.
Thank you. Dr Scott, I sent you an email. I'd really like an answer to that, please. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about it publicly.
No need to respond, Dr Scott. I'm sure you'll answer your emails in due course. Dr Scott, do you have any general business for us?
I do not, Mr Deputy Mayor.
Thank you very much, councillors. Now we can legitimately end the committee meeting, because I've exhausted the report and all debate at 10:51 a.m. Thank you for your indulgence and participation. The next meeting is the City Infrastructure Committee, which will begin at 11:01. Thank you.
Mr Deputy Mayor, now the meeting's shut.